In this video I'm going to be editing a photograph I took of an F15 at RF Lakenheath in real time.
Turn to 240, I was at 275. 513 descending to 4,000. 707.
Hi folks, welcome back to my channel, and today we are continuing the current run of videos about aviation photography. Now, if you've been following my videos recently, you will have seen that I recently upgraded to this lens for my aviation photography, my main lens. This one is a 300mm f2.8 prime, which I've been shooting with a 2x extender. And while I've been testing this out, I've been trying it out over at RF Lakenheath just to make sure I'm fully happy with the results that this lens produces. And I took this photograph here of an F15 taking off from runway 06 at Lakenheath. So what I'm going to do today is edit this photograph in real time and then print it out afterwards. So join me over in Lightroom and we'll get cracking with some editing. Okay, so this is the photograph that I'm going to edit. It's an F15 in a turn on departure or on a missed approach from RF Lakenheath. It's an F15 Strike Eagle, and this was taken with my 300mm prime. So what I'm going to do is do my very basic default edit, and then we'll think about printing it out afterwards. So what I'm going to do is go into the develop window of Lightroom. I've got the latest edition of Lightroom here, which is at the time of recording 12.3. So that came out in April 2023, so it's only a couple of weeks out now. So I'm going to run through my very basic method of editing aircraft photos. So in the develop tab and the basic tab, I'm just going to make my corrections. So my first job is to, oh by the way, this was taken at 1/2000th of a second at f5.6 ISO 400. Okay, so going into the detail basic tab rather, sorry, and increasing the contrast. Now I usually go up about 15 or 16 on this one, and then the highlights right down to -90 or so, 92, shadows up to +90, 92, something like that, and then I move the whites. So that's kind of flattened the image quite a bit, but it's brought out some of the shadows and it's reduced the highlights in the sky. That's kind of what I'm after for that particular, by moving those sliders, the highlights and the shadows. So next we're going to reset the white and the black points. So the white points, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to be blowing out any highlights. So by pressing the option button on the keyboard and moving the white slider, I'm going to move the slider up until everything shows up and then back down. Now there's something to bear in mind here. There is a specular highlight on the canopy just here where the sun is kind of reflecting off of the canopy. I'm not worried about that because that is a bright specular highlight anyway. So I'm not going to reduce the whites so much that it removes that completely. So I'm not worried about that, but all of the rest I am. So finger on the option button, and we're going to move the white slider around and going to reduce it down so that everything disappears apart from that specular highlight on the canopy, which you can just see. And then I'm going to do the same with the black slider. I'm going to reduce the black slider all the way down and then increase until only the very darkest parts of the image are still showing. So on this particular one, I've got a little bit of shadow or blacks on the jet pipes at the back and the LN, the Lakenheath letters on the tail fin just there. I'm happy for those to be jet black. That's fine. I'm not too worried about not having detail in those parts. So just to double check again, about there. And there's a couple of vents and things like that and a bit of dark area in the canopy. That's absolutely fine. So that's the part of the detail part of the sliders. Now we're going to go down to presence. Texture, I'm going to increase. I usually increase this to about 25 something around there. And what I'm looking for here is to bring out some definition in the panel lines and the rivets, and just very fine details on the aircraft. So that looks okay to me. Now clarity I don't tend to use very much these days, because you can end up with a bright halo around the aircraft which doesn't look natural against the sky. So be very careful about clarity. If you're going to use it, I mean, I'll put a little bit in here, but I'm not going to go above. I'm only going to put 4 plus 5 around there. In anything more than that, you can get haloing. And there you go. You can see there that just to show you the extreme, I've put it up to plus 100, and you can see there's haloing around the jet pipes. It's actually a dark halo on this image because the sky is quite bright, and you can see a halo. It's almost like a muddy blur effect around the bottom of the aircraft here. The top isn't so bad, but there's certainly a bit on the back of the fin there and around the underneath of the aircraft just here. So you've got to be very careful of the clarity slider. So I'm just going to put a little bit in for definition, bearing in mind clarity is local contrast, which I kind of already done with texture. So you don't really need to, I would say, use texture more than clarity. But on this image, I've just put a little bit in. Texture, I'm going to take it back to about 17 because I've put a little bit of clarity in. So we'll leave it at that. Next job, dehaze. Well, dehaze can give you some pretty awful results. So that's an extreme, that's plus 88, but be very careful of dehaze. You tend to find that it can change the tone of the image and also bring out really horrible noisy grain. So you can see here in the sky, okay, it's brought out a few clouds and things like that, but it's very noisy. So be very careful with dehaze. And I don't want to do a global dehaze adjustment on this image. I might do some on the sky later. So for now, I'm just going to leave that alone and I'm not going to touch dehaze. Good. Okay, so next job is to go down to saturation, and we're just going to increase the saturation. I generally go to about plus 15 around there. I just want to bring out a little bit of increased saturation in what colours there are in the aircraft. So there's not much on this one, just a little bit of blue flash on the top of the tail fin, and also a bit of blue in the sky as well. And that is where I think I'll leave it. Right, go down to lens corrections, and I want to enable the profile correction, and I'm going to remove the chromatics as well. So just looking at the aircraft here, there might be a tiny bit of purple fringing around the bottom of the nose area here, but we've got nothing to lose, so I'm just going to tick that anyway, and switch on the chromatic aberrations. And then the next job, I'm just going to go back to the basic tab, and I'm just going to fine tune the white balance. So I find that shooting grey military aircraft, they can come out a little bit blue. So what I'm going to do, and it was a sunny day, so what I'm going to do is increase the colour temperature to make it look a little bit more realistic and a little bit more like what I saw with my own eyes on the day. So I'm going to go to about, it was at about 5,100, I'm going to take it up to about 6,500 around there. Let's try that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is going to recrop the image. Now there's not much cropping space here, which is fine, but I'm going to change it to a 16:9 crop, and I'm also going to put a bit of a twist on the image, because I think what I'm going to try and do is make the aircraft look as if it was in a little bit more of a climbing turn than the flat turn. It just gives the image a little bit more of a dynamic feel to it. So that's what I'm going to do there, and that is pretty much it. I'm happy with all the basic edits. I've removed the chromatics, and I've done contrast and everything there. Colour looks great. So next job, I think, is to have a look at denoising. So I'm going to just have a look at this area here. Now this is the darkest area in the image, which by default brings out the most noise. So what I'm going to do is use the new DeNoise AI facility in Lightroom, which is new in this version. It's only been out for a couple of weeks, and overall I'm really impressed with it. Now, I was using Topaz DeNoise AI before, which would mean using a plugin and exporting it from Lightroom and then applying the denoise, then back into Lightroom, and then you've got another copy. So what I'm going to use here is denoise, which is built into Lightroom. So in the detail tab, press denoise and wait for the pop-up window to come up with the enhanced preview, and then what I'm going to do is move the preview image around until I get to this dark area at the bottom of the fuselage at the root of the wing, just there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is reduce the noise so that I can see the grain, and I'm going to increase the amount slider up so that that noise virtually disappears, which on this picture is about +65, but then I'm going to back it off by about 5, just because I think a touch of noise will give the appearance of increased sharpness. We're going to sharpen the picture anyway, but I just think rather than completely removing the noise, just a tiny little bit of noise does actually help the picture. So I'm going to do that and then press enhance, and that's going to take 10 seconds or so. And what happens now is that the denoised image will be saved as a stacked copy, like a second copy of the image in Lightroom, and that is going to be a DNG. And then now we are going to be working on the DNG image, and that does look a lot cleaner. And in fact, I only shot this at ISO 400 anyway, so there's not even on a 7D Mark II, which is getting on to be an old camera now. There's not that much noise, but when you start pulling and pushing sliders around in Lightroom, you can bring out that noise quite easily, especially when we were doing the basic edit, which involved putting the highlights down, boosting the shadows quite a bit. So that does bring out the noise. If you're finding this video useful so far, please don't forget to hit that like button, and also think about subscribing if you're not already, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any more aviation or landscape photography content in the future. Now back to the video. Okay, so my next job now is to see if we can improve the overall colour of the image. Now I find that aircraft tend to pop out more and the whole photograph looks much better if you've got a bit more of a blue sky or definition in clouds, that sort of thing, rather than just a kind of plain pale blue or white sky. So what I'm going to do now is use the AI masking feature in Lightroom, which has probably been out 18 months, 2 years, something like that now. So, or maybe more. So what I'm going to do is go down to the masking option here and then just press sky and let the AI detect the sky for me. So that's kind of done a not bad job. There is a little bit of overspill onto the aircraft. So what I'm going to do is just open up my masking panel here, and what I'm going to do, I don't want to add to the mask, I want to subtract it. So the mask is the red part. So what I'm going to do is hit the subtract button and then go down to brush, and what I'm going to do is use the brush to paint away the pale red areas on the aircraft. Now for this I use my Wacom tablet and use the square bracket buttons on the keyboard to increase and decrease the size of the brush. So I'm just going to start painting, and I'm not going to be too accurate about it because it's quite a pale mask, but what I will do is tick the auto mask, so that will just help me when I get towards the edge of a line, the outline of the aircraft. It will help me stop painting away the actual mask on the sky. So that's the plan for that. So I'm just gonna go around the aircraft and just remove some of the redness on the aircraft. Now I'm going to make sure my flow is up fairly high, which it is. I'm just going to increase it a little bit more up to 90, and feather I'm just going to reduce just a tiny bit. So I've got 80 on the feather, 90 on the flow, and 100% on the density. And I'm just going to go over these parts of the aircraft just to make sure I remove the mask from the airplane, and using the square brackets just to remove bits that I don't want. So you can see up here the top of the fin. I've just gone over a little bit there. So I'm not going to spend too much time doing this, but this is particularly useful here. So I'm just going to reduce my brush size here to get to the edges of the aircraft. I'm going to be too precious about it. You can spend as much time as you want doing this, or as little time as you want. But this is particularly good for when you get to the canopy. So you can see here that you do want the blue sky to come through the canopy, because if we brushed it away, the sky would appear as it currently is, almost white, very pastel blue. So this is where you have to be a little bit careful about what you paint away in the canopy. So just paint away the dark areas and the pilots and the seats, but the glass, the clear glass bit, leave, because you want the blue sky to come through that. So hopefully you can see what I've done there. And there we go. Right, that'll do as far as I'm concerned. That's good enough for me. What mask there is on the airplane that's left is very pale anyway, very pale red, so you're not going to see too much. But like I say, you can spend as much or as little time on how precise you want to be on this. But that's good enough for me. Right, so now what I want to do is get rid of the Wacom tablet, and I'm going to play around with the sliders now so that I'm just adjusting the area that is in the red mask. So for starters, I'm going to get the colour temperature and take it down a little bit. So it's going to improve the saturation of the blue. I will increase the saturation again, which increases the blueness. And then you can, if you want to, you can just finely tune the colour of the blue by using the tint. So there it's gone a little bit magenta or a little bit greener. So I find that just a couple of points, maybe -5, 6, 7 towards the green is the right kind of area to be. Now this is where you can use the dehaze slider if you want. If you use it sparingly, because you don't want halos around the aircraft. And this is where a little glance up at the preview window up here on the top left is actually quite a good idea, because you can kind of get a better idea about what the picture looks like just by a quick glance. Sometimes you're a little bit too close to the situation here. So if a quick glance up there, you can see whether you've got any haloing from the dehaze. So if I'll just give you a bit of an example of that. There you go. You look at this picture here, and yeah, okay, there's a bit of a glow, but if you look up here, you can see that there's a much bigger glow around the aircraft. So that's where it's a good idea just to use small movements of the dehaze slider just to see what you get. Now I've ended up with quite a nice image there, I think. So I'm going to stick with that. The next job I'm going to do is to go down to, we're going to add another mask, so create a new mask. And I'm just going to use a linear gradient and just quite a large gradient, but I'm going to take it up quite high so that you're just getting a tiny bit through the top of the sky, and I'm going to get the exposure and reduce the exposure just a tiny bit. That's the wrong slider, sorry. Exposure up here. There we go. So I'm just going to darken the very top of the image just a tiny bit, just to give the sky a bit of depth to it. That's it. There we go. I'm happy with that. So there we go. That's the finished image in Lightroom. I'm quite happy with how that looks. Now, one next step that I'm doing on pretty much all of my images now is taking it into Photoshop to do a sharpening process. So what I'm going to do now is take this image into Photoshop, edit in Photoshop, and then we are going to do some sharpening. Now, it's a very quick sharpening process. So there's the image in Photoshop. My first job is to do Command J, which duplicates the layer. My second job is to go up to Filter, down to Other, and across to High Pass. Now, you think that the image is gone. It is actually there. I'm just going to boost it up so that you can see it on the on camera. So that's an exaggerated view of what you might get. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to move the radius slider so that I can just about see the image. You just see the outlines of all the sharp edges. Now, what I'm looking for here is lines around all the sharp edges, but very little in the way of halos along those lines. So just here, that I've got 1 point, or let's call it 2. I've got 2 selected there. If I go up to say 7, you can see there's quite a large halo, and you can see quite a lot of detail in the image. So the trick here is to be very subtle with it. You don't want to over sharpen the image. So I generally find that anywhere between 2 and 3 seems to work for my pictures, with little in the way of cropping, with an aircraft that is taking up the full frame on a crop sensor 7D Mark II. So on this particular image, let's settle with 2.5. I can see all the detail. I can see all the outlines of the aircraft very well. I can see detail in the jet pipes, and I can see details in the contrast areas, but I can't see any details in the flat surfaces. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. So we'll go with 2.5 pixels on this one. Press OK. And then now we are going to go down to the blending mode. I'm going to change it to overlay. So that's the overlay blending mode, and that is my sharpening process. So by switching that on and off, you can see that it really makes the image pop. It brings out a lot of the, I mean, just look at the vents here around the top of the aircraft. It just makes a lot of detail really pop out, and in the jet pipe, it just it kind of increases local contrast, but it does it in a way which is really makes you see it. It really pops out, brings out details that you kind of miss. So I really like that. So now I'm going to save that. So Command S to save it. Wait for that to finish. And Command Tab to take it back to Lightroom. There we go. So that's back in Lightroom. So let's just press the I button for the info. So now you can see that my file name is enhanced, noise reduction, and in my case I've got edit, which is the name that I give my Photoshop work. So it's enhanced with noise reduction and it's been edited in Photoshop. So that is my finished image. Now what I would normally do is hit the tab button, press the lights out button twice, and then go away for 5 minutes and come back. and I might go and make a cup of coffee or something like that, so that when I come back to the computer I'm looking at this kind of with fresh eyes. So let's do that now. Okay, so I'm back on the computer now. I've had a short break away from it. Coming back to this picture, I think I'm really happy with the edits that I've done. Okay, so what I think about printing is that I use two different types of paper for printing aircraft images. I either use metallic, which is particularly suitable for colourful images. So I've got lots of deep reds and blues on this picture, and I think it really makes the image pop, which I think looks pretty good. You have to be a bit sparing with this though, because it can look a little bit tacky, but with deep colours or special colour schemes on aircraft that are colourful, then metallic paper does seem to work quite well. Now this was a test image. I've used this metallic paper on an F15 and I don't think it really does it too many favours. It looks great, but there's no reason why you would go out of your way to use metallic on an image like this. And the reason for that is because there's not a lot of colour in the image. It's just a standard grey jet fighter aircraft with a fairly pale blue sky. So I don't think it really works. I mean, it looks good, but I don't think there's a specific reason why you would use metallic on a shot like that. So what I tend to do with grey fighter pictures is use PF Lustre. So that's a PF Lustre 275 from Fotospeed. So that's what I'm going to print this particular picture out on, because I think it's a general purpose, pretty decent quality paper for jet fighter pictures. So that's what I'm going to do. So what do we do to get the picture ready for printing? I'm going to go down to soft proofing, and this is the Lightroom's interpretation of what that picture will look like on a specific paper. So to find out what paper I'm going to use, I'm going to go up to my selection of papers that I have in stock here, and I'm going to make sure PF Lustre is selected, and I've got simulate paper and ink, and this is my printing soft proof now. So if I click on and off the soft proof, this shows me what my image will look like when it's printed. I'm going to go to print, and I'm going to go to page setup and make sure we've just got all the settings in the right place now. So we've got Epson ET 550, A3 paper selected, in landscape, 100% scale. Good. So now I'm going to go over to the right hand side of the screen and just set up my picture. So I've already got my margin set. I generally print my airplane pictures with a 1 centimetre margin around the outside, but because this is a 16.9 crop, I'm going to have bigger borders at the top and bottom, so that's okay, as expected. But the cell size, I can move the cell size just to make sure that I'm making the most of the picture that I've got. So I'm just going to move that so that I'm maximising the size of the image. Now if you wanted to, you can put your watermark here, but I'm not going to put my watermark on this one. I'm just going to leave that, and then you can put guides on if you want and all that kind of stuff. The Lightroom printing panel is actually quite complex, so I just stick to the basics. And then when it comes down to print job, I've got a print resolution of 300 ppi, print sharpening standard, media type I leave on matte, and leave it at that. Now colour management, I need to make sure I've got the right paper selected. So I'm going to make sure PF Lustre is selected there. And now because I've already adjusted the brightness and the contrast, I'm not going to make any print adjustments here. And that is it. So the next job is to go to printer, 8550, and my printer options. So colour matching, I'm just going to make sure colour sync and Epson colour controls are greyed out, because that signifies that Lightroom is doing the colour management for me, which is exactly what I want. Print settings, I want to make sure the media type is Epson Premium Semi-Gloss, because that is the the Epson printer paper setting that Fotospeed suggests for this particular paper, and the high quality print quality. And that's it. So now we're going to load the paper into the printer, press print, and watch it come out, and keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so there you go, that's the finished picture. Printed out on, like I say, Fotospeed PF Lustre 275, and I think it's come out pretty well actually. Quite impressed with the sharpness, the level of detail, and just the clarity in the overall picture. But this was quite a high contrast image to start with. The sun was out shining on the aircraft, so you got some deep blacks and bright highlights on certain parts of it, which looks pretty good. So overall, that's an image I'm really happy with, and it looks good on paper as well. Anyway, hope you found that video useful. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you once again on another video very soon. Many thanks. Take care. Bye for now.